Well, hello and good day. This is the first part of a series of tutorials I intend to make, which will show you how to get the basics of the Scala programming language with the help of the problems of Project Euler. You are probably already interested in the Scala programming language since you're visiting this tutorial, and there are many ways to learn Scala. My tutorials are not all-encompassing. Not at all. They just want to give you a quick start and some quick look at Scala. However, if you want to go more into the depths and into the details, you might want to visit the Scala homepage. And under the documentation, you will find Learning Scala, Tour of Scala, and some manuals which are really good. If you want to go even more in depth, I recommend the book written by the inventor of the Scala programming language, Martin Odersky and others, which is simply called Scala. It's really worth its money, at least in my opinion. Apart from being actually a very good book about Scala, it's one of the best books I've ever read about programming in general. So, you can read all these tutorials and I recommend you do so. However, I personally prefer a more hands-on approach. I want to make my first steps in a programming language by solving some very easy problems, and Project Euler is the right opportunity for this. In case you don't know Project Euler, just a few words about it. The website is projecteuler.net, and I believe it's called Euler. I believe that's the way it's pronounced. If I'm wrong, please give me a short note in the comments. I'm already logged in because I have a user account there. You can easily make one for yourselves. Project Euler shows you a lot of programming problems. Actually, they're not programming problems, they are easy problems that can be solved algorithmically by writing an algorithm. You don't need to use a programming language to solve the problems, however it helps. There are many people who solve the problems with pen and paper by using the math skills. The problems are independent of any graphical user interface or special programming language features or operation system features, and this is why they are somewhat math related in nature. However, you don't need any specific math skills to solve or understand these problems. Everything you need to know is given to you in the description of the problem. When you go here, you have a list of problems. There's the list. You can see there are 7 pages here, and every page contains many problems, I guess about 40 maybe. And I've already sorted them by their difficulty. By default, you will have the sorting, which I will show you now, ascending ID. Because every now and then the makers of Project Euler will add a new problem. Every problem has an ID. I start with 1 and go up. However, the problem difficulty doesn't raise necessarily with ID. They tend to make more harder problems. However, there are some problems in between which are very easy, so you can sort them by clicking here, sort them by scanning difficulty. And the difficulty is determined by the number of people who have solved the problem. Problem 1 has been solved by over 128,000 persons. That's the most, so it's the easiest problem. And this is also the problem which I will show you now. If you come from a Java background, and this tutorial is intended for people who are coming from a Java background, then you will have a Java-like way of solving those problems. When I read the description of the problem, you might even want to pause the video and think of a Java solution for the problem yourself. You don't have to, but you can. So I will write Scala in a much Java-like way later on, and then I will show you how we can make the code shorter and easier to understand by using Scala features. So, let's open the first problem by clicking its title. Here is the description, problem 1. If we list all the natural numbers below 10 that are multiples of 3 or 5, we get 3, 5, 6 and 9. The sum of these multiples is 23. Find the sum of all multiples of 3 or 5 below 1000. This is very much the way that many of the Project Euler problems are described. You get a smaller case with a solution, and then you get asked a question for a bigger case. In this case, the solution is provided for all numbers below 10, and you need to find the solution for all numbers below 1000. Below the question you already see the correct answer. This is because I've already solved the problem. When you have a new account at Project Euler and you not already solved this problem, you won't see the answer. You will see instead a text box where you can put in your suggested answer, or the one you found out, and then a website will tell you if your solution is correct or not. It won't give you any hints, it won't tell you how incorrect your solution is, it will just tell you if it's correct or not. When you enter the correct answer, you will have access to the forum on Project Euler regarding especially this problem. You can discuss with others, you can post your solution, you can ask questions, but only after you've solved the problem. And then you can advance to go on to the next problem. However, Project Euler allows you to solve and see all problems that are there. There is no specific order imposed by the website. I prefer to go through the problems from the easiest to the hardest. And every time I learn a new programming language, Project Euler is one of my first stops, just to check if I can solve the first few Project Euler problems with this programming language. And if I can do this, I know I've grasped the basics of the language. Anyway, so in our case, we can see the answer. I will try to avoid to show you the answer beforehand for the next few problems that I will make tutorials on. However, here in this case, I think it's not that big of a deal. So let's switch over to my IDE. There we go. In case you're wondering, I'm using the Intellij IDE for programming Scala. I've checked out many others. I've checked out NetBeans especially and Eclipse. By the time I've checked, the Scala plugins for those IDEs were not that good. I found them unusable. I've heard there's been some progress made regarding the Eclipse plugin for Scala, but I'm not sure if it's already better or even as good as the plugin for Intellij IDEA. I recommend you check it out. It's really good. So, when you're coming from a Java world, I've already created a small test class, so to say. And what you will see is some familiar things. There's a package declaration right on top. Below this is something which might look like a class declaration, however it's declared as an object. I will get to this later. One thing that you will notice is that there is no semicolon after the package declaration. This is important because in Scala you can leave out unnecessary semicolons. The Scala compiler can determine on its own when a statement has finished, and if then a line break follows, then the compiler knows that it's the end of the statement. You don't need to put a semicolon there. If the compiler finds something is missing, then it will look on the next line if the statement continues there. If you want to put several statements in one line, you got to use the semicolon. You can use it just the way you're used to from Java. Now, one thing you will also find missing is the public declaration. Usually every Java class starts with a public class declaration. You don't need this in Scala because in Scala everything is public by default. If you wish, you might use a private modifier or a protected modifier just as in Java, but you don't have to. And I believe public isn't even a keyword of the Scala programming language. Not sure of that, but you don't have to use the public keyword anyway, because it's probably the most used visibility modifier. So the next thing that is strange is that we don't have a class named Euler001 here, but we have an object. An object is kind of like similar to a class. You can declare methods inside an object. You can have it implement interfaces. It can inherit from other classes, just like with classes. It can define variables, everything that you can do with a class. However, there are two things you cannot do with an object. Number one, you cannot instantiate it. You cannot make any instances of an object type. Number 2, you cannot inherit from it. You cannot make another class that inherits from Euler 001. So objects are basically what you call in Java singleton classes. In Java you would make a class which has a private static variable, which is one instance of this class, a private constructor, so no one from the outside can instantiate it, and have a method like getSingleton or getInstance, which returns you exactly this instance. In Scala there is no need for that, because object already is a singleton, and you can refer to it by using its name, Euler 001 in this case, as if it were a variable. And Scala also doesn't have any static methods. There is no need for static methods, because you simply put a method into an object and then it's basically static. You don't have to declare it as static. And if you put it in a class, it's non-static, just the way you used to. So those are the specialities of an object. And the main method, which I will write in a few moments, is in Java usually static. In Scala you go the other way. You declare an object and make the main method as a part of it. I will show you. I have a macro for that template. There you go, there's our main method. There are some similarities to Java, as you will undoubtedly see. The method has a name, and behind this name come the parameters, and then there is a curly bracket around the method body. This is very similar to Java. However, the declaration starts with def. That's the Scala keyword you use to declare a method or a function, because in Scala methods don't have to belong to objects or classes. There are other ways to define methods which are not part of any object, so they are called functions. And one thing I will do right now is I will add the problem description as a comment. There you go. I've had it in my buffer, in my clipboard, so we can always see the problem that we're trying to solve right now. And now I will start writing the code. By the way, no, I've forgotten something. Look at the argument list. It's like in Java, a string array. I've called it args. However, in Java you would write the type of args before the variable name. Here in Scala you have it behind it, separated with a colon. I like this better, but it's probably just a question of taste. And the array type has a generic parameter. In Scala they are called type parameters of type string. And in Java you would use it, the pointed brackets, the angled brackets to declare this. In Scala you use these, how are they called? I don't know. Square brackets, I guess. This is because Scala has built-in XML support. You can write down XML as a constant, just like you can write down a string. And XML uses pointed brackets as part of its syntax. So the compiler, when you use pointed brackets, cannot know for sure what you mean if you want to declare XML or if you want to declare a generic type parameter. So Scala goes the other way and makes type parameters declared with those square brackets.